Hello everybody and welcome to the May 23rd, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. I figured I'm going to start with a little bit of an update. Essentially, the reason why yesterday's episode had to be recorded on the webcam instead of the camera I have on my PC is because the camera I use for that, I don't know why, but essentially it's not working as well. My computer's slowing down more. Until I get that sorted out, here's probably what's going to happen. Equestria Redacted will more than likely be exclusively recorded through the webcam because those episodes can go up to around 20 minutes. And when I am using the camera for Ephrom Josine Show, more than likely those episodes are going to be shorter. Like here, we're only really covering one article, and it's going to become rarer and rarer until I can really sort out the problem. So, sorry for that inconvenience. But anyway, as I mentioned, I'm only covering one thing tonight. However, it is a treat. Now, Matt Walsh, he's someone, probably out of all the new right figures, he's the one I've covered the most. Because Matt Walsh is, I don't think he's the worst of them. There are tons of worse ones out there. I don't even think he's the most dishonest. Prager is far more dishonest than Walsh is. I think Walsh is the most silly out of all of them. I think Walsh is the one who makes the most ridiculous statements, and anyone who's seen the show before knows what I'm talking about. Well, recently, the Pope was rumored to have told a gay man that is fine, that is how God made him, because, the Pope is Catholic, all that. Well, Matt is also a hardcore Christian. And so he wrote, "No, God does not make people gay." Now, I'm an atheist, so maybe I've overstepped my bounds a little bit by covering this article. However, I think this kind of proves that at the very least, Matt Walsh's version of Christianity doesn't make any sense at all. This combines, of course, Walsh's views with Christianity, by the way, with his views on homosexuals. And mind you, this man wrote an entire book where about a third of it is just saying how gay marriage is impossible, and once compared gay marriage to the government telling you that your dog is a squirrel. I'm not making that up, he did that when he worked for the Blaze. So let's actually read what he has to say and just take a skeptical, neutral, objective perspective on it. In the interest of shedding a little bit of light into this fog, oh yes, oh holy Matt Walsh, I think it must be stated firmly that the Pope's alleged opinion on this matter is extremely false. Whatever his personal view, the fact is God does not give people homosexual inclinations. To suggest otherwise is to claim one of two things. 1. Homosexual activity is not, in fact, sinful. I don't know why I felt the need to put in fact there. We could have just said is not sinful. It is just as good and natural as the embrace of a man and a woman. Okay, notice how he said natural there. Now that implies that homosexuality is unnatural, which is a big point. But if that's the case, why is it that there's been a steady rate of homosexuals in any society that has allowed them to exist openly throughout all of history? Roughly about 5%. And as for, oh, well, now, this is where someone like Matt could respond with, well, that's just because we've corrupted society. Then explain why, I'm not kidding, 1,500 animals have been experienced having some degree of homosexuality in their time. 1,500. So, wait, maybe it's the things that your holy book preaches are unnatural. Also, in his list of proof of homosexuality being bad, of course he adds Leviticus in there. Even though, didn't his own boss say that wasn't an effective strategy? But I'm nitpicking now. Because Matt Walsh is his own man. But even then, may I remind you, Leviticus also contains the lines against shellfish and against mixing two different fabrics. I cannot wait for Matt Walsh's articles against those, because he takes the Bible very seriously. Oh wait, no he doesn't. It's almost like he just makes this up as he goes along or something. Okay, number 2. The only other option for the God made you gay proponent is that the desire for homosexual sex is disordered. The act is sin, but it is God who gives people this temptation. Well, that seems to line up with the rest of your book. I mean, I'm trying to remember exactly what all the 7 deadly sins are off the top of my head. Greed and lust are built into our DNA, especially greed and lust. Well, especially lust, because that's just how we reproduce, and greed, because we live in a capitalist system. And speaking of which, where's Matt Walsh's article against capitalism? That's something I want to know. Gluttony is another one that people eat too much, or is it gluttony? Yeah, sloth or being lazy when people want to do the least amount of work. All those are just survival of the fittest evolution. Oh wait, Matt probably doesn't believe in that. So this proves your opponent's right, and you don't even know that. And I love how you're able to do that, man. But okay, here are some more examples. That would also mean that God destroyed the people of Sodom for being what he made them. Yeah, that's what happened. Or at least he destroyed them for acting on the desires he gave them. Oh, again, that's what happened. Either way, God is turned into the source of man's sinful nature. God is made into the tempter. God is the devil on our shoulder, whispering in our ear. God is the snake in the garden, giving Eve ideas. Okay, wait a minute. It's funny you mentioned that, because you had to go with the earliest possible point. Now, in that point, what had happened? God had just created everything in the Bible. And then that includes that talking snake, and people take this seriously, by the way. That includes a talking snake that tricked someone into eating an apple. Of course, it was a woman, by the way. It's always going to be those women. And made all of society bad, which he put there for no reason, by the way. So yeah, that's what happened, Matt. I'm an atheist, and I know this. God tells man to act a certain way, and then gives him the desire not to act in that way. So, I thought that was the whole point of the life is a test thing, but okay. God is a manipulative tyrant who sets us up for failure. Yeah, he is. And that is why your religion doesn't make any sense. It's funny, too, because Matt seems to understand some of the flaws of his religion, but he's just not self-aware enough to connect the dots yet, and it's kind of amusing to watch him. And then damned us to hell for acting according to the inclinations he gave us. It wouldn't be the worst thing he did. This is actually a point, I think it was the Bible Reloaded that brought this up. When they were doing their review on Atheist Delusion, it was one of Ray Comfort's movies. But essentially, if you actually look at the vast majority of people that supposedly the Christian God sends to hell, it's not like a majority of them are Nazis. I think as Hugo put it. Was it Hugo? I think it was Hugo. Put it. Yeah, Hitler's there, but Anne Frank is his neighbor. Basically every person before Christianity was established is in hell right now because they didn't believe it. But how could they believe it? It didn't exist yet. Well, they were just supposed to live a little longer, I take it. Okay, but here's his debunking of it. This view of God is not just wrong, it is blasphemous. It is also, of course, in direct contradiction to Scripture, which says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Well, then tell me, why do temptations exist? So this creator made people People have temptations, but he didn't create the temptations? Was there some sort of defect that he just didn't figure out until it was too late? Why can't he reverse it? He's supposed to be all-powerful. And this is why I think this is probably Walsh's silliest article to date. Because normally at least he can make sense of his own ideology. You know, we've read articles on this show. At least he had a coherent philosophy throughout them. This is him saying, essentially, all the counters, and then not debunking them. This article works better to debunk itself. It is also illogical. But what's not illogical is the idea that there's an almighty magical creator in the world. If a certain act is disordered, then the desire to commit the act must be disordered as well. But in this desire comes from God. It cannot be disordered. Indeed, in a moral context, disordered may be defined as that which does not come from God. So it seems God makes people gay must bring us back to option 1, that homosexual acts is not sinful. He didn't pluralize it correctly. But that invalidates Scripture, thus challenging the existence of the biblical God. This is the other thing, by the way. But all of these people seem to have the idea. Now, there are tons of contradictions in the Bible. Skeptics Annotated Bible found, I think, over 500 contradictions. I'm going to see the exact number real quick. 552 contradictions within the Bible. And that's out of, I think, 55 books. That's an average of a little less than 10 per book. But for that matter, there's also this Christian view that it was all written by God specifically, when there is very little evidence of that. Or at least there's very little evidence, there's absolutely no evidence that people didn't write that who could have added their own values. For instance, the book of Revelations, the final book in the Bible, it's the one with all the end times prophecy stuff. That was written by a man on a deserted island who had syphilis, and it was literally just his dreams. It's funny, too, because Matt Walsh is all worried about STDs. Well, apparently, a guy with syphilis wrote some of the Bible, so heck, maybe that's how God communicates. Where's Matt Walsh going to say, the case for giving people syphilis? Anyway, I think I've read you enough to prove that this article is more than ridiculous, and that is it. I am Ephrom, and good night.